The young woman had just extracted a small figurine from the earth and inadvertently unleashed a catastrophe capable of annihilating the planet. Her name is Suzume. She frequently experiences peculiar visions and repeatedly encounters an apparition resembling her deceased mother. Today, however, a stranger arrived in her peaceful village. The individual approached her inquiring about nearby archaeological sites. After obtaining his desired information, he departed. Yet somehow, Suzume felt an odd recognition regarding him. Compelled by intrigue, she chose to venture to the mountain ruins as well. This location had once been a thermal spring settlement, but now existed as rubble. Suzume searched extensively, yet observed no one present. Just as she prepared to return, she uncovered an entrance. This portal stood vertically, positioned directly within a water body. Driven by curiosity, Suzume opened the entrance, but what she witnessed beyond it astonished her. She could observe the realm behind the portal, yet couldn't access it. At that moment, Suzume noticed an unusual figurine beneath her feet. Peculiarly, the statue was encased in frost. Then something even more bizarre occurred. The figurine suddenly became a feline and fled. Alarmed, Suzume turned and escaped. She assumed this odd incident would simply disappear with time. However, several days later, while attending classes, Suzume observed something strange occurring beyond the peaks. Curiously, none of her peers seemed to detect anything abnormal. Then everyone's devices began broadcasting emergency notifications. A tremor was approaching. Although the vibrations persisted only moments, Suzume was astounded to witness a colossal serpentine entity ascending from the mountains, yet no one except her could perceive it. Suzume already suspected she might have triggered this. When she returned to the mountain, she discovered the enormous beast was emerging from that identical portal, and the stranger from earlier was frantically attempting to seal it. The individual noticed Suzume's presence, but in that momentary lapse of attention, he was propelled away by the force surging from the entrance. As the immense creature collapsed to the earth, the earthquake warning sounded again. The stranger charged at it once more. Suzume rushed to assist as well. Finally, with both of them collaborating, they successfully managed to seal the portal. Subsequently, Suzume brought the stranger back to her residence and helped dress his injuries. Through their discussion, Suzume discovered the individual's name was Suda. The giant entity they had witnessed was called an earthworm. The earthworm is a tremendous power that flows beneath the Japanese archipelago. It possesses no awareness of itself. Yet once it accumulates sufficient energy, it emerges, triggering a massive tremor. What they accomplished earlier only temporarily contained it. Unless they employ a keystone to properly secure it, the earthworm will manifest again elsewhere. Suda's purpose is preventing that occurrence. Suzume suddenly recognized that the keystone he referenced might indeed be that figurine she had extracted. Just then, a feline appeared at the window. It appeared malnourished and weak. Suzume went to retrieve some preserved fish to nourish it. She found the cat charming and asked if it wished to be her pet. However, what she didn't anticipate was that the feline could speak, and it clearly disliked Suda so intensely that it transformed Suda into a chair and then escaped. Suda immediately pursued it. Although Suzume was bewildered, she collected Suda's keys and ran out as well. They ended up on a ferry vessel, where passengers were discussing the moving furniture they had just witnessed. By the time they reached the deck, the small feline had already leaped onto a nearby motorboat and vanished. Suzume went outside to the deck and located Suda. She finally admitted to him that she had removed the keystone, but Suda didn't reproach her. He only blamed himself for arriving too late. Suda explained he was a closer. He'd been traveling throughout Japan to prevent the earthworm from escaping. That evening while resting, Suzume experienced that peculiar vision again. In the dream, she was a young child, and she opened a mysterious portal hoping to locate her mother. Then Suzume awakened. The vessel had already reached land. Meanwhile, the feline they were seeking had become famous online. People began calling it Daijin. Although Suda instructed Suzume to return home, she remained concerned because it wasn't just Daijin that had become viral, but also the chair-shaped Suda. If he were captured, he would certainly be taken for experimentation. Therefore, they began tracking Daijin's location using information from the internet. At that moment, Suzume's classmate, Mickey, happened to pass by. As the two conversed over some citrus, Suzume suddenly spotted the earthworm emerging from the distant mountains. Without time to explain, Suzume quickly grabbed Suda and rushed away. Although Mickey didn't understand why Suzume was so panicked, she decided to offer her a ride on her motorcycle. After reaching their destination, Suda instructed Suzume to remain behind while he went to seal the portal himself. The earthworm had appeared at the site of their former academy, which now lay in ruins. Suda wanted to close the portal, but in his current condition, he couldn't even grasp the key. That's when Suzume seized the key and ran forward with the earthworm about to break free. Suda told Suzume to shut her eyes and sense the feelings once connected to this location. In that instant, Suzume began hearing voices. Voices of the pupils who once attended classes here. Suda stood beside her and began reciting an enchantment. Together, they succeeded in closing the portal. However, just then, Daijin reappeared. He warned that more portals would continue opening, then disappeared without a trace. Suzume sent a message to her aunt Tamaki to inform her she was safe and asked her not to worry. Afterward, she stayed at the guest house operated by Mickey's family. During dinner, Suzume's phone buzzed. It was an extended text message from her aunt. Though lengthy, every phrase reflected Tamaki's profound care and worry. Suzume mentioned that Tamaki was already in her 40s, but still appeared beautiful as her guardian. Tamaki had nurtured her ever since she was small. Suzume felt she had stolen the prime years of her aunt's life, preventing her from ever marrying. Later that evening, while preparing for sleep, Mickey couldn't suppress her curiosity. She asked why Suzume always carried around that chair. Suzume replied that it was a memento left behind by her mother. Mickey also wanted to ask why she had gone to that deserted academy. Though Suzume didn't respond, Mickey sensed she was involved in something significant. The following morning, someone online spotted Daijin on a large bridge. Suzume rushed back to her room and found Suda. Suda realized that Daijin had already reached Kobe. The two of them departed immediately, but shortly after, a torrential downpour began falling. They took refuge at a bus shelter. Just then, a vehicle stopped beside them. Inside was a young mother with 2 children. They were also heading to Kobe and kindly offered Suzume transportation. The woman's name was Rumi. She operated a restaurant in Kobe. She told Suzume that if she had nowhere to stay, she could remain at her establishment temporarily. As soon as Suzume arrived in Kobe, she spotted Daijin. Just then, a massive earthworm burst forth near the entertainment park. Suzume and Suda decided to separate. Suzume would seal the portal, and Suda would pursue Daijin. However, in the process of chasing Daijin, Suda accidentally activated the power. The long-abandoned entertainment park suddenly illuminated again. Even the observation wheel began rotating. Suzume climbed onto it, and this time she actually witnessed the realm beyond the portal. What lay inside was identical to the world from her visions. Mesmerized, Suzume started walking toward the portal. Suda saw this and rushed to prevent her. If she continued, she would fall from the observation wheel. Then Suzume was suddenly brought back by countless voices. Though the place was now deserted, it still contained many people's treasured memories. Suda led Suzume away from the portal. Together, they sealed it shut. Everything returned to silence. Suzume described what she had witnessed behind the portal. Suda was shocked. She had seen the realm of the afterlife. It's where spirits go after death, a world opposite to our own and the place where the earthworm dwells. When Suzume returned, she found that the people at Rumi's house were still awake. They had been worried about her. They had even prepared her delicious stir-fried noodles. After dinner, Suzume and Suda sat down to talk. Suda was actually a university student. His greatest aspiration was to become an educator. Being a closer was a responsibility inherited through his family. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Suda felt his body becoming cold and rigid. It was as if he were sitting alone before a portal, his spirit slowly drifting away from his body. Just as Suda was slipping into unconsciousness, Suzume suddenly kissed him, bringing him back to life. Suzume showed Suda her phone. Daijin was now in Tokyo. Rumi drove them to the railway station. She knew Suzume had run away from home and reminded her to contact her family so they wouldn't worry. Suzume checked her phone and found over 50 unread messages. Her aunt was already en route to find her, but Suzume couldn't concern herself with that now. She and Suda had to reach Tokyo as quickly as possible. Suda's home was in Tokyo. They soon arrived at his place and retrieved an ancient book from the shelf. Inside, it clearly documented everything about the earthworm. Keystones were used to suppress the earthworm. There were 2 in total aside from the one Suzume had extracted. The other keystone was in Tokyo, sealing the earthworm's head. Daijin had likely come to Tokyo to remove that second keystone. Just then, Suda's friend Serizawa showed up. He had come looking for Suda because he hadn't seen him in a while. Suzume pretended to be one of Suda's relatives. After chatting with Suzume for a bit, Serizawa left, but the moment he stepped out, an earthquake alert activated. The earthworm had emerged again, and it was very close. Suzume rushed over in panic. At the same time, Daijin appeared. Suda immediately gave chase. They finally saw the source of the earthworm. It was coming from a tunnel, and almost the earthworm's entire body had already emerged. There was no time to hesitate. Suda jumped onto it without hesitation. Suzume followed right after. To others, the earthworm was invisible. They only saw a girl floating up into the sky. The enormous earthworm coiled in the air, but the people below remained completely unaware. It spiraled higher and higher, now covering all of Tokyo. If it were to fall, it would cause an unimaginable catastrophe. The only way to contain it was with a keystone. But they had no idea where the keystone was. That's when Daijin spoke. It had already transferred the keystone's power to Suda. That meant Suda was now the keystone. Suda had already sensed something was wrong. Ever since he had turned into a chair, he had felt the presence of the keystone's power. He just hadn't dared to acknowledge it. Now, with the earthworm about to crash down, the final choice fell to Suzume. Would she save countless lives or sacrifice the person she had grown to care for? It was an agonizing decision with no right answer. But in the end, Suzume chose to save the world. A beautiful aurora flashed across the sky like a rainbow, then vanished. No one knew what had just happened. No one knew the price Suda had paid. Under Daijin's protection, Suzume landed safely on the ground. In that hazy moment, Suzume thought of her mother. The chair was one her mother had crafted for her with her own hands. It was Suzume's most precious treasure. Then Suzume woke up. She found herself beneath a river channel. Ahead of her was a large portal. It was the Tokyo Gate. Through the portal, Suzume clearly saw Suda in the afterlife. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't enter. Just then, Daijin came running up. Now at last it could be alone with Suzume. But all Suzume could think about was how to bring Suda back. She yelled at Daijin to go away, to stop talking to her. When Daijin heard that Suzume didn't like it anymore, it suddenly turned weak and fragile. After closing the Tokyo Gate, Suzume walked away. She went to a convenience store to charge her phone. Then she boarded a train to the hospital because she remembered Suda had mentioned that his grandfather was hospitalized. Suzume found Suda's grandfather Hitsujiro. He seemed to already know everything. When he learned that Suda had become the keystone, he remained calm. He had also seen the earthworm appear earlier. Suzume asked him how to enter the afterlife. She wanted to rescue Suda, but Hitsujiro said she was meddling in something beyond her. Suda was gradually becoming the vessel for a deity. The keystone, those living in the real world, could no longer intervene. Hitsujiro didn't want Suzume to live with guilt. He told her to forget all this and return to her normal life. But Suzume couldn't forget. She decided to find a way to open the Tokyo Gate herself. Seeing her resolve, Hitsujiro sat upright and said, "The realm of the afterlife might be beautiful, but it is the land of the dead." He asked Suzume if she was afraid. Suzume firmly answered that she feared nothing. The only thing that scared her was a world without Suda in it. Her words deeply moved Hitsujiro. He asked Suzume what she had seen in the afterlife. Suzume told him she had seen her younger self there and her deceased mother. Hearing that, Hitsujiro realized that Suzume had accidentally entered the afterlife as a child. He then told her to go find that portal. Only through that portal could she enter the afterlife. After Suzume left, a large feline appeared at the window. It seemed like Hitsujiro already knew it, and he entrusted it with helping Suzume. Later, Suzume went to Suda's home. She washed off the dirt from her body. Then she put on Suda's shoes. But just as Suzume stepped out, she ran into Saraizawa. He told her to get in the car so they could go find Suda. At that moment, Tamaki also arrived, demanding that Suzume return home with her immediately. Without time to explain, Suzume jumped into Saraizawa's car. Seeing this, Tamaki got into the car as well. But then, Daijin suddenly appeared in the back seat. It didn't say a word. For the first time, Suzume, who had been under so much pressure, could finally rest. This time, they were headed to Suzume's old hometown. Later, they stopped at a service area for food. Suzume had no appetite and sat alone in the car. Then, another earthquake hit. Worried, Tamaki rushed over to her. She asked why Suzume wanted to go back to her old home, but Suzume didn't know how to answer. Her silence only made Tamaki more upset. She tried to drag Suzume away with her, but Suzume had reasons, and she simply couldn't go back yet. They began to argue. That's when Suzume noticed something was off about her aunt. In her memory, Tamaki had never once yelled at her, let alone said something like telling her to leave. Suddenly, a large black feline appeared behind Tamaki. Its name was Sadaijin. The moment Daijin saw it, he rushed forward, but he was no match for Sadaijin. Tamaki then returned to normal. The next morning, the three of them continued on their journey. Saraizawa figured those two felines must have something they wanted Suzume to help with. Sadaijin explained they hoped to use human power to return to their original forms. This sudden voice shocked Saraizawa, and he accidentally drove the car into a ditch. They were still 20 kilometers from their destination. Suzume prepared to run the rest of the way. Tamaki noticed an abandoned bicycle in the field nearby and decided to use it to help Suzume get there. Finally, they arrived at Suzume's hometown. The once warm, cozy house had become a pile of ruins. Suzume followed her memories and dug a small box out of the ground. It was her treasure chest. Inside was her childhood diary, though she couldn't remember much from her early years. She must have stumbled through a portal back then. As she flipped through the diary, a flood of memories returned to her. Her hometown had been destroyed in the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. Her mother had died in a disaster. Since then, her aunt had been the one raising her. Daijin called Suzume over. The portal she had been searching for was hidden beneath a mass of vines. It turned out Daijin hadn't been the one opening the portals to release the earthworm. On the contrary, it had been guiding them to each portal without hesitation. Suzume jumped in. The earthworm was still trying to break through the sealed portal. Then Daijin transformed into a massive white feline and pinned the earthworm to the ground. In the distance, they saw Suda. Suzume sprinted toward him. The apocalyptic scene all around filled her with fear, but she never stopped running. Suzume was determined to save Suda, even if it meant becoming the keystone herself. Hearing her resolve, Daijin understood her heart. It came to help too. With their combined efforts, Suda was finally saved. Then Suzume noticed Daijin wounded and exhausted. It transformed once more into the keystone. Because Suda had been rescued, Daijin could no longer hold the earthworm down. Suda brought Suzume to a high point and began reciting an incantation. Hearing the chant, Daijin charged toward them. Then it itself transformed into a keystone. Suda and Suzume, each holding a keystone, leaped down and drove them into the earthworm's body. Everything went quiet. They had saved the world. At that moment, they spotted a little girl standing on a distant ridge. Suzume suddenly understood that little girl was her younger self. She was looking for her mother. As little Suzume cried, the older Suzume brought her the chair. She knew this young version of herself was in pain, but she would grow up one day. She told her, "The future isn't something to fear. In the future, you'll fall in love. You'll be loved by many. Even if things seem dark now, one day, the light will come." Hearing those words, the little girl stopped crying. Under Suzume's gentle gaze, she stepped through the portal to the other world. After everything was over, Suda decided to return to Tokyo for a while. Suzume walked him to the train. They embraced. Suda thanked Suzume for saving him and promised he would come find her again. The next day, Suzume and Tamaki took the ferry home. At the dock, the man who had always liked Tamaki came to pick them up. From then on, Suzume returned to her normal life. She started studying even harder than before. For months passed, and once again Suzume saw that one person she had missed so deeply.